Hello. I am so glad that you are here for this toe reading. So let's just dive on in and have a look at your toes. First of all, beautiful pedicure. Always nice to see when people take care of their toes and go the extra mile for the self care to get a pedicure. So well done on that. We are going to uh, do this reading starting with the great toe, the first toe, the path toe, and then move out towards the pinky toe, which is the trust and prosperity toe. Your left foot represents and communicates to us information that is inside of us, the way that we are internally, and our connection with Source. Our right foot is how we're showing up in the world, the way that we are perceived, and the way that we perceive ourselves and interact with the outside world. So, looking at those first two toes. So, first of all, based on those first two toes, as well as the solid groundedness that I see on the outside of the foot coming down from the pinky toe, uh, you are grounded, generally speaking. You've got nice, wide circular pads on those toes. And so, groundedness, I am going to um, theorize that you have a lot of earth energy in you, and the earth energy is where you get a lot of your strength and power. Your first toenails are lifted just a little bit, as are the tops of your toes. So sometimes you can really be in your head also. And so I see here actually a really good balance. I also see some judgment here for either being perhaps too slow or too fast, to this or to that, too much or too little. And there's also still some hope and optimism there. Those lifted first toenails indicate some optimism on your life path. The other thing that I'm observing about these first toes is if you look at the nails and the top part of the toe, they're both leaning, pointing, if you will, towards the pinky toes, which indicates looking to the past. I can also see in your toes how if you follow and track up to that first knuckle, it's straighter than past that first knuckle. And so, as an adult, perhaps there have been new awarenesses that have come to you, um, different opportunities and for growth that have come to you that may have shaken your groundedness, gotten you way up in your head. Also, my guess is that you sometimes, I call it gaslighting yourself. And it's when your body is telling you something and your brain is overriding it. If your intuition is telling you something, and then your consciousness comes in and tries to figure it out. And so just paying attention to what that looks like for you, paying attention to your thoughts. And are you speaking to yourself and your intuition and your body in a way that would be absolutely unacceptable if anyone else was doing it, and yet you do it with yourself? We're going to talk more about this when we get to your communication toes, but that's what I'm seeing in the first toe, is that this is showing up there as well. Considering, where are you in your life path? Where are you on your spirit path? And because both of those toes are indicating a slight deviation from what would be considered ideal. And so perhaps you're in a state of transition, refiguring yourself out. Um, Transition is what's coming in my mind. What are the transitions going on in your life? What are the transitions that are creating questions in your mind and in your heart about what is your purpose? What is your mission? Where are you going in your life? And how does that connect from the outside world to the inside world and your connection with Source? So these are questions that we will explore further when we have our session together. So these are questions right now to just consider And when you have your live reading, all these questions and things I give you in this video reading to consider and ponder, we will explore in further depth according to what resonates for you. And that's why I do the readings this way, so that you get this information. You can let it settle in, and then we can address what's floating to the top for you. So this life path and spirit path toes, just considering where would be the place that is in alignment, because what we want to see are those toes starting to shift and moving into a more straight line from coming off of your foot. And when it does that, when those toes do that, and in 6 months from now, if we were to look at your toes, if you take into account and to heart all the things that we're talking about, they're going to look quite different. And so what would it look like if they were straightened out? Well, the first thing it would do is it would create some more space between your first and second toe. And my guess is that you are a leader. You as a child were probably independent and not afraid to stand alone. As you have become an adult and life has happened, you have probably done what I call survival conformity, which is perhaps conformed to a partner, a family dynamic, a culture, a workspace situation, all of those things. And I call it survival conformity because oftentimes we do it unconsciously in order to quote unquote survive. And that means belong. We have a deep desire to belong. And as a leader, sometimes we don't belong. As a leader, sometimes we're leading the pack and we don't even know what we're doing. You have a lot of leadership potential. I can see that in the squareness, especially on that right foot. If you look down between the space between your first and second toe, it's kind of square. And that's what I call the queen's toe. The queen's toe is, well, exactly what it says. It's a leadership toe, and where you can stand on your own. And the caution there is standing on your own is very different than being isolated. If your large toes start to ignore your smaller toes, then you definitely want to make sure that you're taking that into account, because we don't want to be isolating or ignoring those other toes. Second toes. Of all of your toes, these are the second most prominent toes that I see on your feet. So when we look at these second toes, they're actually very, very similar to each other. If there were any differences, it would be that there's a little bit more blocked energy on the right toe. But as I look at them, there's a curve or an arc to them, and they point down. So what this indicates to me is that there are things that are inside of you that are ready to be expressed or communicated. The second toe is about expression, and a part of self-expression is communication. And this has to do with that survival conformity, that basic need. In our animal brains, we need to fit in, because if we don't fit in, it actually means death. Remember, your animal brain, its only job is to keep you alive. It does a really, really good job of that. I'm so grateful that we have that animal brain, because it keeps us alive. The challenge is, or the dark side is, sometimes what feels like it might be life-threatening is actually just ego threatening, because our ego also lives back here in the back of our head, in our animal mind. And so sometimes we don't express the way we desire to express, the way indeed we are meant to express. Sometimes we don't say the things that we desire to say, and indeed that would be important to say for our own self-actualization. And we don't do these things. The biggest reason I see is to keep the peace. So my question for you is, where are you not expressing? Where are you not communicating in order to keep the peace? Relationships are very, very, very important to you, and you self-betray you survival conformity or survival conform for these relationships. And so really considering, what does that look like? Because what I would like to see with these toes, and what will happen, is as you express more authentically, as you communicate in a way that honors you, those toes are going to start to lift and become more flexible and be more straight and not pointing down. Now, I want to bring up the fact that a lot of times when we decide that we're done with survival conformity, we're done with self-betrayal, we're going to set up those boundaries, or we're going to keep those boundaries, we move into a space of combativeness. And that's not where we want to be either. When we have to fight for our boundaries with that metaphorical sword, we actually don't have good boundaries. Okay? Because if we're constantly having to defend our boundaries or put barbed wire on the top of that wall, which we're going to talk about when it comes to those relationship toes, then we haven't created good boundaries. What we have done is set down a boundary, set a line in the sand, and said, don't cross this line or else. And that doesn't feel good to anyone. It doesn't feel good to you. It's exhaustive. And it doesn't feel good to people who may or may not know where that line in the sand is from hour to hour, day to day. Because what we need to realize is that they've gotten used to a pattern. They are in a pattern of you self-betraying, of you doing what it takes, not communicating, not expressing, in order to keep the peace. And then all of a sudden you come out with a sword. Well, that brings about destruction. And so, where are your boundaries? What do you want and what don't you want? What are you willing to lose? What are you not willing to lose? These are important questions to ask yourself so that you know where your boundaries are. What are your deal breakers? And then how do you communicate those? How do you express those in a way that very few people will actually cross them? Anyone who's aware will not actually cross them. And if they do, you can kindly communicate to them, where is your boundary? And they will honor it, not be offended, not try and tell you why you're wrong, not try and gaslight you, and not get defensive about it. They will simply realize that they've crossed inadvertently a boundary, and you become more aware of where that is so that you can radiate and reflect that out so that people are not actually crossing your boundaries, and you don't feel like you have to self-sabotage, self-betray, and defend aggressively your boundaries. Self-sabotage, that is something that is strong, that is coming up in these expression and communication toes, which again are the second toes. So what are you saying to yourself? What's the dialogue that you've got going on in your head? When do you say things to yourself that would not be okay for anyone to say to you? When do you allow others to say things to you that are not acceptable, but you put up with it? Or when are people crossing your boundaries, but you don't communicate it in order to keep the peace? There is a message inside you that wants to come out. Let's talk about your action toes. Your action toes, your fire energy toes. That's your third toe. And so when we look at those two toes, of all of your toes, those two between the right and the left foot are the most different. And I only do this side by side because it's illustrative of the differences, and also shows us where internally and externally we're not doing the same thing. It's not in alignment. And your action toes, or your fire toes, are one of those places. So first of all, let's talk about what's happening on your right foot, and then we'll talk about what's happening on your left foot. So right foot, how you are expressing and interacting with the outside world, is straight. That toe is straight. There's a little bit of blocked energy towards the end of it. Nothing that strikes me as being concerning. That toe is straight. There's some flexibility in that toe. The nail is straight on and lifted. You are a person of action. You take action. In fact, sometimes you might even be a leap before you look kind of person. And you are a person who probably in the love languages, acts of service are the way that you give and receive love, because action is important to you. Action is beautiful. Keep doing what you're doing in your action, especially in the outside world. When we meet together, I'm going to be curious about what is your work? How do you spend most of your time? Because it's working for that action toe. It is absolutely working for that fire toe. And so I'd love to be able to tease out what are the aspects of that that are really working for you and what's not, because there are things in that that are not working for you. And so that action toe, fantastic. If you look, it's even slightly longer than that communication toe. But that communication toe, once you start expressing and communicating what's inside of you, that communication toe is going to get more flexible and it's going to straighten out. And then your toes are going to have more of an arc to them, as opposed to having the action toe really be the prominent toe here. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a really beautiful thing. I can just see that that expression toe, that communication toe, wants more flexibility. So while I'm on that, doing some manual manipulation where you are creating flexibility in those toes, a gentle massage where you're working the joints of those toes to become more flexible would be a very good thing. And while you're doing that, doing some affirmations, it's safe for me to express. I know how to express myself inwardly and outwardly. My inward expression and communication aligns with my outward expression and communication. I speak kindly to myself. I know what my boundaries are and I express those. So those are some affirmations, as well as asking questions. What is this toe communicating to me? What, in fact, speaking directly to it, what are you communicating to me? What am I not understanding? How can I understand this better? What are some actions, going back to that action toe, that I can take to bring about greater alignment in my expression? All right, let's move on to the action toe on the left foot. This is your internal action. You most likely do not always keep commitments to yourself like you keep commitments to those outside of you. In fact, I would say that oftentimes you put yourself on the back burner, last in line. You take action for people outside of you, for people, but you don't always do the things that bring you joy. You don't always take action on your goals and your dreams. So this is going to be another place that I would invite you to do some questioning and some manual manipulation of that third toe on your left foot as you ask it, what is it communicating to you? As you journal about where are the places that you're actually not showing up for yourself, that you're not taking action for yourself. Please remember that, and you already know this, that that is not selfish. That is the way that you can show up in all areas. Because if you're not taking action for yourself, if you're not keeping commitments for yourself, it can burn you out. And we can get trapped in the story matrix where we are either the hero or the wounded hero, which is the martyr, the victim, or the one nobody ever wants to be, and that's the villain. And the problem, well, one of the many problems with being in that story matrix is we do not take action for ourselves, is that it creates a story for everybody else. So not only are we playing one of those roles, other people or entities are playing those other roles in our mind. So what stories are you and roles are you living out that are keeping you from taking action for yourself? All right, I'm actually going to move on to your pinky toes because those relationship toes are the ones that I wanted to talk the most about. Your pinky toes, these are your prosperity and trust toes. So some blocked energy in there. And what I like about those toes is that they do have a nice solid nail on them. Like you don't have a mini nail or no nail. They are both looking to the past. You see how they're just kind of turned. The other thing that I'm finding interesting about these is, again, you've got a difference between your right toe and your left toe. On your right toe, you can see that it is not hiding under the relationship toe. You can see how on the left foot, it's moving towards pointing to, pointing down, and hiding underneath that fourth toe, your relationship toe. And then your right toe is simply looking to the past. With that nail looking to the past, changes always start in the nail and then move down. So the closer to the foot that it is, the longer it's been a part of your day-to-day reality. So nails are where you want to look for changes that you're tracking, as far as some of the changes that we've talked about in this session and that we will talk about, as well as when you look at your toes, track your nails. That's the first place that things are going to show up, that you can see, is it tracking in a way that goes along with what I desire? Or is it telling me something that I may not be consciously aware of, but it's showing up in my body? So, for example, when we talk about, let's just talk back about that left action toe, looking at that toe and seeing, when does that toenail start to lift? When does that toe start to point upward and become a little bit more flexible? You're going to know that you're on the right track because your body is going to tell you. Your toes are one of the first places that our body communicates to us and that we can track those. Conversely, 10 years ago, had you looked at that toe and started to see the trajectory of it pointing down, that could have been a stopping point where you started to ask those questions and started to explore that out. And so catching a pattern before it becomes super ingrained. And now that's a skill that you can use on your toes forever, tracking those differences. Back to your pinky toes. I think that your right pinky toe, your right prosperity trust toe, is actually spot on. We live in a world where not everybody can be trusted, so it is normal and natural for that toe to be just a little twisted. I'm not worried about it because you have a nice, straight, solid nail on it. I would encourage you to believe deeply in yourself that you are worthy of all the prosperity that the world has to offer. It is not scarce. It's not for some and not for you. And prosperity can look a lot of different ways. So your assignment for that toe is to look at all the ways in which you are prosperous, whether that's in good work, relationships, where you live, lucky things that have come to you. And I use that word lucky always in air quotes. Just looking at that financial prosperity, health prosperity, however prosperity has turned out for you. Just give gratitude for it. And then on your left foot, here's what I'm seeing there. Do you see how that toe on your left foot is turned up a little bit more? It's less looking to the past, but it's pointing down. And so you have in you the potential to really receive showers and showers and showers of prosperity, whatever prosperity looks like, the big three, health, relationships, money, opportunities, gifts, all this prosperity. You have all of that in you. And because you have self-sabotaged and self-betrayed, and not taken action for yourself, that toe feels depressed. That toe feels a little bit pessimistic, even hopeless. You can see how that's pointing down. Manual manipulation with this toe, where you're just gently rubbing that knuckle and pushing back towards the foot and saying affirmations to yourself. I am worthy. I'm worthy to receive. I choose to receive now. I can receive from other people. I don't have to do it all myself. Those would be some affirmations that I would consider using, as well as obviously asking that toe, what would it take for you to be optimistic again? What would it take for you to believe in this? All right, these relationship toes. These are your fourth toes. When I first saw your toes, that was the first toe that really stuck out to me, because there is a great deal of blocked energy in those toes. We're going to talk about the left one first. This is relationship with self. Everything else that we've talked about with this toe actually has to do with this relationship with yourself. You can see from this toe that there's a lifetime of blocked energy, specifically in this the if there was a halfway point in your life up to this point, it would be in this second half of your life right now and where you've lived there. You've built up some very, very strong walls to protect yourself. Heartbreak, perhaps death, or at least death of relationship, um, death of even who you thought you were. Death is a word that's coming strongly to me when I see the calluses that you've built and the way that the toes curve, leaning into the action toe. Perhaps not receiving love in the way that you wanted to, or not feeling like it was okay to ask for acts of service for yourself as an act of love. Perhaps not feeling like you could ask for the way that you desire to be loved, no matter what it was. Perhaps feeling powerless to say no. Self-sacrifice, and then feeling mad about it. This can look like, after everything I've done, and this is what I get. So this is when we move into that wounded hero, the martyr portion of the story matrix. Where is martyrdom showing up for you in your life? Where have you built up walls of protection that we think protect us? Our ego really is trying hard to protect us. And so it builds up these walls. And these walls, these toes, what I see here energetically is like those a wall with barbed wire on the top of it, or defending your boundary with a metaphorical sword. Really feeling like you must defend yourself. Where do you feel like you must defend yourself, and how can we change that narrative? Or indeed, if that is the reality beyond the story, what can you do to change that story, that reality? So a lot of blocked energy there, and some pessimism as it actually points down and then to the future. So there's a little bit of hope because it's pointing towards the future, but really pointing down. There's generational things too. Look at generational patterns that are showing up specifically in relationships, intimate relationships. That's where this is running. So you're carrying generational patterns from your ancestors that you now have with this light and knowledge that you have right now, shining this illuminating light on this. You now have the opportunity to clear this out. And from my belief system, it'll clear it out from past lives. It'll clear it out from generations before you. So it clears that out, and it clears it out for the future, for your children, as well as right here linearly in this sphere for people in your actual sphere, specifically your family of origin. So this is powerful work that we're talking about here with this relationship toe. And if you do nothing else from this reading, I really recommend that with both of these toes, you massage these toes, and these toes are telling you something important, and it has to do with building up walls, self-sabotage, self-betrayal, and then the trust aspects, going back to those smaller toes. So that's with your internal self. So again, paying attention to your internal dialogue. Where are you not showing up for yourself? Where are you sacrificing yourself to keep the peace? It's not serving you anymore. And we can see that in that relationship toe. What energy blockages are there to release? And the great thing is with the manual manipulation, with the intention alone and the affirmations alone, sometimes we don't even have to know why. sometimes things will just start to move. It just took shining a light on it, but it's like shining a light on something that you don't know what it is, but perhaps it seems scary before you shine a light on it. And then you look at it and you see that it's not scary. Or even if it is a little scary, you now know what to do. And it seems less scary because we've shined a light on it. Let's move on to the right fourth toe, that relationship toe. So you can see that there's a lot of similarities there. This is your relationships with those in the outside world. And I believe that everything is a relationship. Our relationship with people, obviously, but our relationship with our bodies, our relationship with health, our relationship with money, our relationships, everything is a relationship with our space, with time. These are all related and interconnected. And so, and I would even say fairly recently, you can see the difference between the two toes. On the right toe, there is less blocked energy than on the left toe. Gaslighting yourself. I actually did a podcast about gaslighting yourself. My podcast is the Essence Reveal podcast. It's on all the platforms. I'm just in season 1, so it's not like you have to go back through tons of episodes. But listen to that episode about gaslighting if that feels right for you, so that this concept of and definition I have around gaslighting yourself will, if it resonates, I think it's going to be powerful for you. So relationships with others, you're also blocking yourself there significantly, but it really ties back to that left toe. You're blocking yourself because of something that's inside of you. There is absolutely nothing inherently flawed or wrong. You are perfect as you are. You have been brought to this point in this lifetime to work through these things, specifically these walls. I invite you to consider what the lifetime impact, cost or payback is of living in a defensive way. And by defensive, I mean blocking ourselves in this position of defending ourselves and not playing full out in our relationships because we're trying to protect ourselves. So I ask you, what is the lifetime payout or cost, so payback or cost, of protecting yourself and not playing full out in order to protect yourself? So that when somebody does disappoint you, as people always will, every single time, you can justify in your mind, well, at least I didn't give 100% to that. I held a little bit of myself back from that. So I feel safe. But that's all a mind game. Your body is in the meantime feeling every ounce of pain that it would if you had actually just played full out. In fact, a little bit more, because playing full out, being vulnerable, brings you closer to people. And so that when that disappointment happens, you know that you didn't hold back. You didn't play 99%. You played 100%. And you gave it everything you had. There was nothing more you could do. You were enough. You weren't too much. You were exactly perfect because you played full out and you played 100%. So please manually manipulate these fourth toes, asking yourself these questions and some affirmations. I am really, really, really looking forward to talking to you and having our session together on the day that we're meeting so that we can explore these things more. Thank you for the opportunity to read your toes. It's been an honor.